I am 26 years old. My wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The church was filled with flowers, white roses and lilies, my favorites. Everyone I loved was there. My mother was crying happy tears in the front row. My father looked so proud. I stood at the altar looking at Mark. He was the man I was going to spend my life with. My heart was so full of love for him. He looked handsome in his tuxedo. His blue eyes were fixed on mine. But something was wrong. His smile was tight. It did not reach his eyes. The priest said, "Do you, Mark, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Mark took a deep breath. The whole church was silent. Everyone was waiting for him to say, "I do." But he did not say it. He just stood there. Seconds felt like hours. I could feel a cold dread creeping into my heart. My own smile started to feel stiff on my face. I wanted to whisper to him, to ask him what was wrong, but I was frozen. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it seemed to fill the entire church. "I can't do this," he said. A gasp went through the crowd. My mother stood up. My father put a hand on her arm to hold her back. I just stared at Mark. I could not understand what was happening. This had to be a joke. A terrible, cruel joke. "Mark, what are you doing?" I whispered. My voice was trembling. He would not look at me. He turned away from me. He looked past me at my maid of honor. He looked at my sister, Clara. She was standing there holding my bouquet. Her face was pale. She looked as shocked as I felt. Or maybe she was not. Mark took a step back from me. He walked right past me. He went to my sister. He took her hand. Clara did not pull away. She let him take her hand. My bouquet of white roses fell from her other hand and landed on the floor with a soft thud. Then, in front of everyone, in front of our families and friends, Mark got down on one knee. He was still holding Clara's hand. He looked up at her. His eyes, which had been so cold when they looked at me, were now filled with something else. It looked like adoration. "Clara," he said, his voice now strong and clear. "I have been in love with you for months. I was a fool to think I could live without you. I know this is sudden, but I cannot marry your sister. I want to be with you. Will you marry me?" The world stopped. I could not breathe. My own sister, my fiancé. The silence in the church was broken by a sob from my mother. Mark's parents were staring with their mouths open. I looked at Clara. I waited for her to slap him. I waited for her to scream at him, to defend me. She was my sister, my best friend. She would never do this to me. But she did not. A small, tearful smile touched her lips. She looked down at Mark, and then she looked at me. There was no apology in her eyes. There was only pity. And something else. Triumph. "Yes," Clara whispered. "Yes, Mark, I'll marry you." That was the moment my heart shattered. It was not just the humiliation of being left at the altar. It was the betrayal. It was the deepest, most painful betrayal I could ever imagine. From the two people I trusted most in the world. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The shock was so great that it turned into a cold, hard shell around my pain. I turned around. I did not say a word to them. I walked down the aisle. My wedding dress, the one I had spent months picking out, felt like a costume. A costume for a fool. I did not look at anyone. I could feel their eyes on me. I could feel their pity and their shock. I kept my head high. I walked out of the church and into the bright sunlight. I did not know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. My father caught up with me outside. He put his arm around my shoulders. "I am so sorry, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I leaned against him, but I did not cry. I could not cry. I was empty. "Take me home, Dad," I said. My voice sounded flat and strange to my own ears. He led me to the car. The beautiful vintage car we had rented for our grand exit as husband and wife. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. My mother got in the back with me. She was still crying. She tried to hold my hand, but I pulled it away. I did not want anyone to touch me. The ride home was silent. I just stared out the window. The world looked the same, but everything was different. Everything was ruined. When we got back to my apartment, the one I was supposed to share with Mark, I went straight to my bedroom. I took off the wedding dress. I let it fall to the floor in a white heap. I put on an old t-shirt and sweatpants. My parents hovered in the doorway. "Do you want us to stay?" my mother asked. "No," I said. "I want to be alone." They left. I heard the front door close. The silence of the apartment was deafening. It was filled with ghosts. The ghost of my future. The ghost of my happiness. I looked around the room. There were pictures of me and Mark on the walls, smiling, happy, in love. It was all a lie. I walked into the living room. His things were still here. His favorite chair, his video games, his stupid collection of coffee mugs. I felt a surge of anger. It was the first real emotion I had felt since he said those words at the altar. It was a hot, powerful rage. I picked up one of his coffee mugs. It said, "World's best fiancé." I threw it against the wall. It shattered into 100 tiny pieces. The sound was loud and satisfying. I picked up another one, and another. I smashed every single one of them. Then I started on the pictures. I tore them from the walls and ripped them in half. I ripped his smiling face away from mine. When I was done, I sank to the floor, breathing heavily. My hands were shaking, but I still did not cry. The anger had burned through the numbness, but the tears would not come. There was just a cold, hard knot in my stomach. My phone buzzed. It was on the coffee table. I picked it up. There were dozens of missed calls and messages. Most of them were from friends expressing their shock and sympathy. A few were from Mark's family, apologizing. And then there were 2 messages that mattered. One from Mark, one from Clara. Mark's message was short. "I am so sorry for how that happened. I never meant to hurt you." Hurt me? He did not just hurt me. He destroyed me. He humiliated me in front of everyone I knew. And he was sorry for how it happened? Not for what he did? The rage flared up again. Then I read Clara's message. "I know you're angry. I know you hate me. But it's not what you think. We need to talk. I can explain everything." Explain what? How she fell in love with my fiancé? How she let me plan a wedding, knowing it was all a lie? How she stood beside me as my maid of honor, pretending to be happy for me? There was no explanation for that. There was only betrayal. I did not reply to either of them. I turned my phone off. I did not want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to disappear. I lay down on the couch and stared at the ceiling. The pieces of the broken mugs and torn pictures were scattered all around me. It was a perfect reflection of how I felt inside. Broken. Shattered. I must have fallen asleep at some point. When I woke up, it was dark outside. The apartment was cold. I felt a deep, aching loneliness. The reality of my situation finally started to sink in. I was alone. My fiancé was gone. My sister was gone. My future was a blank, terrifying space. That was when the tears finally came. They were not loud, hysterical sobs. They were silent, hot tears that rolled down my cheeks and soaked into the couch cushions. I cried for the love I thought I had. I cried for the sister I had lost. I cried for the fool I had been. After a long time, the tears stopped. The emptiness returned, but it was different now. It was not numb anymore. It was sharp. It was focused. Something had changed in me. The hurt was still there. The betrayal was still there. but underneath it, a new feeling was growing. Resolve. They thought they could break me. They thought they could humiliate me and walk away into their own happy ending. They were wrong. This was not over. Not by a long shot. I did not know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I was not going to let them get away with this. They were going to regret the day they chose to destroy my life. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a purpose. I looked at the mess in the living room. It was a disaster, but it was my disaster. I started cleaning it up. I swept up the broken pieces of ceramic. I gathered the torn photos. I did not throw them away. I put them in a box of evidence. As I was cleaning, I started thinking practically. Mark's name was on the lease. We had a joint bank account. We had put down deposits for a honeymoon we would never take. There were loose ends, and loose ends could be pulled. I decided to start with the money. We had a savings account specifically for the wedding and honeymoon. I had put most of my savings into it. Mark had put some in too, but I had contributed the majority. I needed to see what was left. I turned on my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. My heart pounded in my chest. I was afraid of what I would find. I clicked on the savings account. The balance was displayed on the screen. It was almost zero. My blood ran cold. There should have been thousands of dollars in there. I clicked on the transaction history. I scrolled down. And then I saw it. A single large transfer, made 2 weeks ago. The entire balance of the account had been moved to another account, an account I did not recognize. The date of the transfer was significant. It was the day after my bridal shower, the bridal shower that Clara had planned. She had been so sweet that day. She had made a speech about how much she loved me, about how she could not wait to have Mark as a brother. It was all a lie, every word. They had been planning this for weeks. They had drained our joint account. My money. They had stolen my money. This was not just a betrayal of the heart. This was theft. The cold resolve inside me hardened into steel. This was the first piece of leverage, the first weapon in my arsenal. They had not just broken my heart. They had committed a crime. I printed out the bank statement. I highlighted the transfer. I put it in the box with the torn photos. My mind was clear now. The path forward was becoming obvious. I was not just going to make them regret what they did. I was going to make them pay for it. Literally. My best friend Sarah called me. I had been ignoring everyone, but I knew I needed to talk to her. I answered the phone. "Oh my God, honey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "No," I said honestly. "I'm not okay, but I will be." "I'm coming over," she said. "Don't try to stop me." She was at my door 20 minutes later with a bag of groceries and a bottle of wine. She hugged me tightly. It was the first physical comfort I had allowed myself, and I almost broke down again. But I held it together. I showed her the mess. I told her about the bank account. I showed her the printed statement. Sarah's eyes widened. "They stole from you?" she said, her voice a mix of shock and fury. "That is not just messed up. That is illegal." "I know," I said. "And that's just the beginning. I'm going to find out everything." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to pack up all of Mark's things," I said. "And while I do, I'm going to look for anything that can help me. Any other secrets they've been hiding?" Sarah nodded, a determined look on her face. "Okay," she said. "Then let's get to work. We'll be detectives. What are we looking for?" "Anything," I said. "Receipts, letters, emails, anything that shows how long this has been going on. Anything that shows what they did with my money." We started in the bedroom. We packed his clothes into boxes. We went through his drawers. At the bottom of his sock drawer, tucked away in a corner, I found a small velvet box. My heart stopped. It was a ring box. But it was not the one he had used to propose to me. This one was different. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a beautiful diamond ring. It was not my engagement ring. It was a different style, more ornate, more expensive. It was the ring he had used to propose to Clara at my wedding. There was a small, folded piece of paper under the ring, a receipt. The ring had been purchased 3 weeks ago, the day he told me he was working late. Another lie. He had been buying a ring for my sister. Sarah looked at the receipt over my shoulder. "That snake," she whispered. "He used your money to buy a ring for your sister." I put the receipt and the empty ring box into my evidence box. Each piece I found made me stronger. It stripped away the grief and replaced it with a cold, hard anger. They had been so arrogant, so sure they would get away with it. They had underestimated me. We moved on to the small office space we shared. Mark had an old laptop that he rarely used anymore. He preferred his tablet. I had a feeling about that laptop. "Do you know the password?" Sarah asked. "I think so," I said. He always used the same one, the name of his childhood dog. I typed in the password. The screen lit up. I was in. I opened his email account. I started scrolling through the messages. Most of them were junk mail and work-related emails. But then I found a folder. It was labeled New Beginnings. My heart started to beat faster. I clicked on it. The folder was full of emails. Emails between Mark and Clara, dozens of them, going back for months. "I found it," I said to Sarah. My voice was barely a whisper. We sat side by side and started reading. It was all there. The beginning of their affair, the secret meetings, the lies they told me. They talked about me. They called me naive. They said I was too trusting. They made fun of my excitement about the wedding. "I can't believe I get to see you every day and she has no idea," Clara had written in one email. "It's almost too easy." "She makes it easy," Mark had replied. "She believes every word I say. Just a few more months of this and then we can be together. We just need to be smart about the money." The money? It was always about the money. I kept reading. I found the emails about the joint savings account. They had planned to drain it all along. They had a plan for it. And then I saw it. An email with the subject line, "The Dream." I opened it. It was a business plan. A detailed, well-researched business plan for opening a small cafe. A cute, trendy little place in the historic part of town. It was my dream. I had talked about it for years. It was my someday plan. I had a scrapbook filled with ideas. I had shown it to Mark. I had even shown it to Clara. They had both been so supportive. They had encouraged me. And now I was looking at my dream, stolen from me, written out in a business plan with their names on it. They had used my ideas. They had used my money. They were going to open my cafe. Together. That was the moment the last of my love for them died. It was replaced by something much colder, much harder. This was not just about a broken heart anymore. This was about my life, my future, my dreams, and they were not going to take that from me. I printed out every single email. I printed out the entire business plan. I put it all in the evidence box. Sarah looked at me. Her face was pale with anger on my behalf. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I closed the laptop. I looked at the box sitting on the floor. It was full of their lies and their betrayal. "I'm going to let them think they've won," I said. "I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to let them get comfortable. And then, when the time is right, I'm going to destroy them." The next few days were a blur of logistics. I had to call all the wedding vendors and cancel everything. The caterer, the florist, the photographer. Each call was a fresh wave of humiliation. I had to explain that the wedding was off. I did not give them details. I just said it was not happening. Most of them were sympathetic, but I could hear the curiosity in their voices. The story of what happened at the church was surely spreading like wildfire. I lost thousands of dollars in non-refundable deposits. It made me sick to my stomach. especially knowing that Mark and Clara had my savings. But I considered it the cost of my freedom, a very expensive lesson learned. Mark's parents called me. His mother, Eleanor, was a kind woman and she was sobbing on the phone. "I am so, so sorry, dear," she said. "I don't know what to say. We raised him better than this. We are ashamed, deeply ashamed." "It's not your fault, Eleanor," I said, and I meant it. His parents had always been wonderful to me. "Is there anything we can do?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not right now. I just need some time." I appreciated her call, but it did not change anything. It was Mark's mess to own. My own parents were a different story. My father was quietly supportive. He would drop by with groceries or just to sit with me, not saying much, but his presence was a comfort. My mother, however, was struggling. She was embarrassed. She was worried about what people would say. "I just don't understand how this could have happened," she said one afternoon, wringing her hands. "In front of everyone. The shame of it." "It's not about you, Mom," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I know, dear, but your sister, I don't know what's gotten into her," she continued. "She's not answering my calls. Have you spoken to her?" "No," I said, "and I don't plan to." "You have to talk to her eventually," my mother urged. "She's your sister. Families fight, but you have to forgive. You have to be the bigger person." I looked at my mother, and for the first time, I saw her not just as my mom, but as an enabler. She wanted to smooth things over. She wanted to pretend this was a normal family squabble. She wanted to avoid conflict, even if it meant sacrificing my feelings. "No, Mom," I said, my voice low and firm. "I don't have to forgive her, and I don't have to be the bigger person. The bigger person gets walked all over. I'm done with that." She looked shocked, but for once she did not argue. She saw the new hardness in my eyes. I finished packing up Mark's things. I had a dozen boxes filled with his life. His clothes, his books, his stupid video games. I stacked them by the front door. Then I sent him a text. "Your things are packed. They are by the door. Come and get them tomorrow between 9 and 5. The key you have will no longer work after that. I will not be here." He replied almost immediately. "Can we please talk? I need to explain." I typed back a single word. "No." The next day, I left the apartment early. I went to a coffee shop with my laptop and my evidence box. I spent the day organizing everything. I created a timeline. I cross-referenced the emails with the bank statements and the receipt for the ring. A clear picture of a calculated long-term deception emerged. It was even worse than I had thought. They had started their affair nearly 6 months ago. They had been planning to take my money and my business idea for at least 4 months. The public humiliation at the wedding was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was part of their plan. An email from Clara confirmed it. "It's better this way," she had written to Mark a month before the wedding. "If you just leave her, she'll play the victim forever. But if you do it publicly, if you choose me in front of everyone, it will be so definitive, so final. She'll have to accept it. Everyone will see that our love is the real thing. A grand gesture. A grand gesture." They had planned my public shaming as a romantic climax to their sordid little story. They were not just betrayers. They were cruel. They were sociopaths. As I sat there in the coffee shop, a cold fury settled deep in my bones. My plan began to take shape. It was not enough to get my money back. It was not enough to expose them. I had to dismantle their grand gesture. I had to turn their triumph into their own personal hell. I needed a lawyer. My Uncle Robert was a lawyer. He was my father's brother, a no-nonsense, sharp-as-a-tack man who specialized in contract law and civil litigation. He was perfect. I called him. "Uncle Robert," I said, "I need your help. I have a problem." I met him at his office the next day. I brought my evidence box. I laid it all out for him. The bank statements, the emails, the business plan, the receipt for the ring. I told him the whole story, from the altar to the discovery of the laptop. I did not cry. I was calm. I was factual. He listened patiently, his face unreadable. He read through the emails. He examined the bank statements. When I was finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "Well," he said, "this is quite a mess, but it's a very well-documented mess." "What can we do?" I asked. "We have a few options," he said. "The transfer of funds from the joint account is a clear case of fraudulent conversion. We can certainly go after him for that. The fact that your sister was complicit makes her equally liable. The business plan, using your intellectual property, is a bit murkier, but it establishes intent. And the whole thing, the public humiliation, the calculated cruelty, that could fall under intentional infliction of emotional distress." He paused, tapping his pen on his desk. "We could take them to court. We would almost certainly win. But it would be public. It would be messy. It would drag on for months, maybe years." "What's the other option?" I asked. A slow smile spread across his face. "The other option," he said, "is we use this evidence as leverage. We don't file a lawsuit. Not yet. We arrange a private meeting, just us, them, and maybe your parents and his parents, as witnesses to the fallout. We present them with the evidence of their crimes, and we offer them a deal." "What kind of deal?" I asked, leaning forward. "They pay you back every single penny they took." "With interest," he said. "They sign a legally binding document turning over all rights to the cafe concept back to you. They also pay you a substantial sum for damages. In return, you agree not to press criminal charges or file a civil suit. We handle it quietly, but we handle it completely." It was perfect. It was better than a public trial. It would force them to confront what they did in front of their families. It would strip them of their money and their stolen dream. It would leave them with nothing but each other. "Yes," I said. "That's what I want to do." "Good," Uncle Robert said. "Then let's send them an invitation to a meeting they can't refuse." The invitation came from my uncle's law firm. It was formal. It was intimidating. It requested the presence of Mark and Clara at a meeting in his office to discuss urgent financial and legal matters. It also strongly recommended that their parents attend as well. I knew they would be scared. A letter from a lawyer is never good news, but I also knew they were arrogant. They would think they could talk their way out of it. They would think they could play the victim, paint me as a bitter, vengeful ex. They had no idea what was waiting for them. In the week leading up to the meeting, I focused on myself. I started going to the gym. I met up with friends I had neglected during my wedding planning. I started to feel like myself again. A different version of myself. Stronger, warier. I also made a few quiet inquiries. I found out the address of the cafe they were planning to open. It was a beautiful little spot. Just as I had imagined. They had already signed a lease. They had already started renovations. They had invested my money deeply into their stolen dream. That was good. It meant they had more to lose. The day of the meeting arrived. I was nervous, but it was a cold, controlled nervousness. Not the fluttering anxiety of a victim, but the focused energy of a predator. I met my uncle at his office an hour early. We went over the plan one last time. "Let them talk first," he advised. "Let them dig their own graves. Then we present the evidence, piece by piece. We control the narrative." My parents arrived first. My father gave me a supportive squeeze on the shoulder. My mother looked pale and anxious. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. "It's going to be so unpleasant." "Yes, Mom," I said. "I'm sure." Then Mark's parents, Eleanor and George, arrived. They looked tired and sad. They greeted me with awkward, apologetic hugs. Finally, Mark and Clara walked in. They were holding hands. They were trying to present a united front, a picture of true love against the world. But I could see the strain in their faces. Mark looked haggard. Clara's eyes were puffy, and she was wearing too much makeup. They stopped when they saw me. For a moment, no one spoke. Clara was the first to break the silence. "What is this?" she demanded, looking at my uncle. Why did you call us here? This is harassment. Please, have a seat, Uncle Robert said calmly, gesturing to the chairs on the other side of the large conference table. Reluctantly, they sat down. Their parents sat with them. My parents sat with me. It was like a scene from a movie. Two warring families. Uncle Robert began. We are here today to discuss the dissolution of the financial partnership between my client. He nodded at me. And Mr. Mark. Mark scoffed. Financial partnership? We were getting married. It's not a business. On the contrary, my uncle said, opening a file. When you have joint assets, it is very much a business. Let's start with the joint savings account. The one with a balance of over $50,000, money which my client contributed the vast majority of. He slid a copy of the bank statement across the table. On this date, 2 weeks before the wedding, the entire balance was transferred out of the account. Mark, can you explain this transaction? Mark glanced at Clara. She gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was for a surprise, Mark said, his voice sounding rehearsed. A wedding surprise for her, a long-term investment for our future. An investment? My uncle said, raising an eyebrow. How interesting, because my client was not informed of this investment. Under the law, when you transfer funds from a joint account for a purpose not agreed upon by both parties, that can be considered misappropriation of funds. Or, to put it more simply, theft. Clara jumped in. It wasn't theft, we were going to tell her. It was a business we were starting, for all of us. Ah, yes, my uncle said, pulling another document from his file. The cafe, a lovely concept. I have a copy of the business plan right here. He slid it across the table. It's very detailed, but I only see 2 names on it. Yours, Mark, and yours, Clara. My client's name is curiously absent. My mother gasped. My father stared at Clara, his face a mask of disbelief. That was just a draft, Clara said quickly, her voice rising. We were going to add her name later. She's just twisting this because she's hurt and jealous. Am I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Am I jealous, Clara? Or am I just wondering why my sister and my fiancé were secretly planning to open my dream business with my money behind my back? We did it for you, she insisted, her eyes flashing. You're too impulsive. You don't know how to handle money. We were setting it up for you to protect you from yourself. The audacity of her lie was breathtaking. She was trying to paint me as incompetent, as a child who needed her guidance. So, you drained our savings, bought yourself a new engagement ring with my money, and planned to humiliate me at my own wedding to protect me? I asked, my voice dripping with ice. That's your story? Mark's father, George, finally spoke. Mark, is this true? Did you use their joint savings to buy that ring for Clara? Mark flushed a deep red. It was complicated, he stammered. It's not complicated at all, my uncle said. He slid another piece of paper across the table. The receipt for the ring. Purchased with funds from the same account the savings were transferred into. It's a very clear trail. Eleanor, Mark's mother, started to cry softly. Mark, how could you? This was the moment. They had lied. They had been caught in their lies. It was time to close the trap. They have a different version of events when they think no one is listening, I said, looking directly at Clara. A more honest version. My uncle pressed a button on a small digital recorder he had placed on the table. And then their voices filled the room. The recording I had found on the laptop. Mark and Clara, laughing. She has no idea, Clara's recorded voice said, filled with glee. She's so busy picking out flowers and worrying about seating charts. She makes it easy, Mark's voice replied. She believes every word I say. As soon as the cafe is up and running, we can drop the act. Once we're making money, she can't touch us. What if she wants in? Clara asked. We'll tell her she's too unstable to be a business partner, Mark said with a chuckle. We'll say we did it for her own good. She'll have a fit. But what can she do? By then, it will be too late. The recording continued. They mocked my wedding dress. They laughed about how my mother was so excited to have Mark as a son-in-law. And then came the part about the wedding day itself. The grand gesture. Clara's voice cooed. It will be so romantic. Everyone will see that our love was strong enough to overcome anything. They won't see a betrayal. They'll see a love story. My uncle stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. It was thick with shock and horror. My mother was staring at Clara, her face ashen. Mark's parents looked like they had been physically struck. Clara's face was white. Mark was staring at the table, unable to look at anyone. Their united front had crumbled. Their lies were exposed. Their love story had been revealed for what it was, a cheap, cruel, and criminal plot. Uncle Robert leaned forward. "Now," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Let's talk about what happens next." The aftermath of the recording was devastatingly quiet. No one screamed, no one shouted. The truth was so ugly it had silenced everyone. Mark's father, George, was the first to speak. His voice was heavy with disappointment. He looked at his son, not with anger, but with a profound sense of shame. "You are not the man I thought you were," he said to Mark. "You are a thief and a coward." Eleanor, his mother, just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "There are no words." My own father stood up. He walked around the table and stood behind Clara. He did not touch her. He just looked down at her. "I don't know who you are anymore," he said, his voice cracking. "Your mother and I raised you to be honest, to be kind. What happened to that girl?" Clara finally looked up. Her face was a mess of tear-streaked makeup. "Daddy, she started, but her voice broke. "Don't," he said, holding up a hand. "There is nothing you can say." My mother was a wreck. She was looking back and forth between me and Clara, as if she couldn't comprehend that one of her daughters had so completely destroyed the other. The illusion of her perfect family was shattered. Uncle Robert cleared his throat, bringing the focus back to the matter at hand. "As I was saying," he said, his tone all business, "we have two paths forward. Path A is the legal one. I will file a civil suit for the recovery of the stolen funds, plus punitive damages for fraud and emotional distress. I will also be handing over this evidence to the district attorney's office to pursue criminal charges for theft and conspiracy." Mark's head snapped up. "Criminal charges?" he squeaked. "Yes," my uncle said flatly. "What you did is a felony. You could both go to prison." Clara let out a choked sob. The reality of their situation was finally hitting them. This was not just a family drama anymore. This was serious. "Path B," my uncle continued, "is the one where we resolve this here. Today. Quietly." He slid a document across the table. It was a settlement agreement he had prepared. "Here are the terms," he said. "First, you will repay the $50,000 you stole, in full, within 7 days." Mark and Clara looked at each other in panic. "We don't have it," Mark said. "It's all tied up in the cafe. The lease, the renovations. That sounds like your problem, not ours," my uncle said coldly. "Sell something. Borrow it. I don't care how you get it. But my client will have her money back in 1 week." He continued. "Second, you will pay an additional $50,000 in damages. For the emotional distress, for the public humiliation, and for the canceled wedding costs. That can be paid in installments, but the first payment is due in 30 days. $100,000? Clara whispered, horrified. "Third," my uncle went on, ignoring her, "you will sign over the lease to the cafe property to my client. You will walk away from it. You will forfeit any money you have put into it. The dream, as you called it, is now hers. Legally. And fourth," he said, his eyes locking onto theirs, You will both sign a non-disclosure agreement. You will never speak about this to anyone. You will never contact my client again in any way. If you do, the entire agreement is void, and we immediately proceed with Path A. He leaned back. Those are the terms. They are not negotiable. You have 1 hour to decide. Your parents can stay and advise you. I'm going to take my client to get some coffee. He stood up and I stood with him. As I walked out of the room, I did not look back at them. I could feel their desperate, terrified eyes on my back. The power had shifted completely. Their grand gesture had led them to this moment. Trapped, exposed, and facing ruin. We went to a small cafe down the street from my uncle's office. He bought me a latte. My hands were still shaking slightly, but I felt a sense of profound relief. It was over. The confrontation was over. "You were amazing," I said to him. "Thank you." He smiled. "You were the amazing one. You stayed calm. You held your ground. They never stood a chance." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. I watched the people outside, living their normal lives. My life had been anything but normal for the past few weeks, but now, for the first time, I felt like I could see a path back to normal. A new normal. "What do you think they'll do?" I asked. "They'll sign," he said without hesitation. "They're scared, they're humiliated, and their parents will push them to do it. George and Eleanor won't let their son go to jail. And your father won't let this drag through the courts. They'll find the money." He was right. When we returned to the conference room an hour later, the atmosphere had changed. The fight was gone. There was only resignation. Mark and Clara were sitting silently. Their parents had been talking to them in low, urgent tones. The settlement agreement was on the table in front of them, next to a pen. George, Mark's father, stood up as we entered. "They will sign," he said, his voice strained. "We will make sure you get the money. My wife and I will cover the initial $50,000. They will pay us back, and they will pay you the rest." He looked at Mark and Clara. "Sign it," he commanded. With trembling hands, they each signed the document. They did not look at me. They could not meet my eyes. After they had signed, my uncle made copies for everyone. He handed one to me. It was a legally binding contract. My victory, in black and white. "The business with my firm is concluded," my uncle said, his voice formal again. "I expect the wire transfer for the first payment within 7 business days." He looked at Mark and Clara. "I would advise you to leave now." They practically scrambled out of their chairs. They rushed out of the room without a word, their parents following them. Now it was just me, my uncle, and my parents. My mother came over and hugged me. This time, her hug felt different. It was not about smoothing things over. It was about support. "I am so proud of you," she said, her voice thick with tears. "You were so strong, and I am so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see what Clara was becoming. I'm sorry I asked you to be the bigger person." "It's okay, Mom," I said. And for the first time, I felt like it might be. My father hugged me too. "You handled that better than I could have," he said. "You got your justice." I had. But I knew the road ahead was still long. The money would come back. I would have the cafe. But my family was broken. That was a wound that would take a long time to heal, if it ever could. In the week that followed, the money appeared in my bank account just as promised. $50,000. The first installment of my stolen life returned. I hired a contractor to go and look at the cafe space. The renovations Mark and Clara had started were mostly cosmetic. They had good taste. I had to give them that. They had followed my design ideas from my scrapbook almost exactly. It was eerie. Walking into a place that had only existed in my head, brought to life by my betrayers. But I decided to change it. I did not want their ghosts in my new beginning. I picked new colors. I chose different furniture. I redesigned the layout. I made it my own. Sarah was with me every step of the way. She helped me pick out paint samples. She went with me to restaurant supply stores. She was my rock. "Are you really going to do this?" she asked me one day as we were looking at espresso machines. "Run a cafe?" "Yes," I said, a smile touching my lips for what felt like the first time in forever. It was always my dream. They tried to steal it, but now I'm taking it back. On my own terms. I did not hear from Mark or Clara. The non-disclosure agreement was working, but I heard things through the grapevine. I heard that Mark's parents had forced them to sell their cars to help pay me back. I heard that they had to move out of their nice apartment and into a small, cheap rental on the bad side of town. I heard that they were fighting constantly. The grand love story that was supposed to be forged in my public humiliation was not holding up so well under the weight of debt and shame. Their romance was built on a foundation of lies and theft, and now that foundation was crumbling. My relationship with my parents was slowly healing. My father and I were fine. My mother was trying. She stopped talking about forgiveness and started talking about the future. She was excited about the cafe, but there was a shadow between us, the shadow of my sister. I had not spoken a single word to Clara since the meeting in my uncle's office. I did not know if I ever would. Some betrayals are too deep to be forgiven. She had not just broken my trust. She had tried to erase me, to steal my life and wear it as her own. A few months later, the cafe was ready to open. I called it the next chapter. It felt appropriate. I had a grand opening party. All my friends were there. My father and my uncle stood behind the counter, beaming with pride. My mother was there too, looking happier than I had seen her in a long time. The cafe was a success from day one. People loved it. They loved the coffee, the pastries, the atmosphere. I loved it too. I loved the work. I loved being my own boss. I loved building something that was truly mine. One afternoon, about a year after the wedding that never was, I was working behind the counter. The cafe was busy. I was laughing with a customer, and then I saw them. Mark and Clara were walking down the street on the other side of the road. They did not see me. They were arguing. I could see it in their body language. Clara was gesturing wildly. Mark was shaking his head, his shoulders slumped in defeat. They looked terrible. Mark had gained weight and lost the confident swagger he used to have. He just looked tired. Clara was thin and pale. The triumphant glow she had at my wedding was long gone. She looked bitter, resentful. They stopped walking and stood there, arguing on the street corner. They looked like two miserable people, trapped in a life they had built on someone else's ruins. Their love story had turned into a cautionary tale. I watched them for a moment. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even pity. They were just strangers to me now. Strangers who had once tried to ruin my life. A customer called my name and I turned away from the window. I smiled and took their order. I had a business to run. I had a life to live. They had tried to take everything from me. My money, my love, my dream. But in the end, they had failed. I had gotten my money back and more. I had found a strength I never knew I had. And I was living my dream. They were left with nothing but each other and the bitter knowledge of what they had done. They had to live with their choices every single day. They had to live with the shame, the debt, and the failure of their grand gesture. That, I realized, was the most perfect revenge of all. Not the money, not the cafe. It was my happiness, my success, my peace. I had my next chapter. They were stuck on the same miserable page, and they would be stuck there forever. And I never had to think about them again. The first few years of running the cafe were a whirlwind. I worked harder than I ever had in my life. There were early mornings and late nights. There were moments of panic when an oven would break or a key employee would quit. But through it all, there was a deep, abiding sense of satisfaction. Every problem I solved, every customer I served, every dollar I earned, it was all mine. My relationship with my mother continued to improve, though it was forever changed. The old, easy intimacy was gone, replaced by a more careful, deliberate connection. We never talked about Clara. It was an unspoken agreement, a black hole in the center of our family that we both carefully navigated around. I knew my mother still saw her, secretly at first, then more openly as time went on. I never asked about it. It was her choice, and I had to respect that, even if I didn't understand it. My father was my biggest cheerleader. He would come to the cafe almost every day for his morning coffee. He would sit at the same table by the window and read the newspaper. Sometimes he'd bring a friend and proudly introduce me as my daughter, the owner. Seeing his pride was one of the things that kept me going on the toughest days. One afternoon, he came in looking more somber than usual. He waited until the lunch rush was over before he spoke to me. "I saw Clara last night," he said quietly. I stiffened, but I kept my hands busy wiping down the counter. "Oh?" I said, my voice neutral. "She and Mark split up," he said. I stopped wiping. I looked at him. I wasn't surprised, but hearing it confirmed was still a jolt. "It was bad," he continued, not looking at me, but at the street outside. "He left her. Apparently, he's been seeing someone else. He told Clara that their entire relationship was a mistake, built on a lie, and that he could never respect her after what she did to you." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. The man who orchestrated the lie was now using it as his excuse to leave. "He blamed her for everything," my father said. "For the money they owed, for the shame with his family. He told her she was the one who pushed for the public spectacle at the wedding. He basically washed his hands of the whole thing and walked away." "And Clara?" I asked, my voice still flat. I was curious, but it was the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen. "She's a mess," he said. "She's lost her job. She's going to lose her apartment. She called your mother hysterical, asking for money." "And what did Mom do?" "She gave her some," he said with a sigh. "I told her not to, but you know your mother. She can't stand to see her children suffer, no matter what they've done." I nodded slowly. Of course she did. My mother would always be the fixer, the smoother over of things. "She wants to see you," my father said, finally meeting my eyes. "Clara, she's been asking to talk to you." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The peace I had so carefully built for myself felt threatened. The thought of seeing her, of hearing her voice, made my skin crawl. "No," I said. It was not a decision I had to think about. It was an instinct. "I told her you'd say that," he said, and I could see the relief in his face. "I think it's for the best. Some things can't be fixed." He was right. I had moved on. My life was full and happy. I had good friends. I had a thriving business. I was even starting to date again, cautiously. A kind man, a local bookstore owner who knew my story and was not intimidated by it. He admired my strength. Dragging Clara and her chaos back into my life would be a step backwards. It would be like reopening a wound that had finally, painstakingly, scarred over. I had nothing to say to her. Her apology, if she even had one to offer, would mean nothing to me. It would be for her, not for me. A way to ease her own conscience. I was not interested in being her confessor. A few weeks later, my mother approached me. It was after closing time at the cafe. She had helped me clean up, a pretense for a difficult conversation. "Your sister is not doing well," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Dad told me," I said, not encouraging her. "She's really hit rock bottom," my mother pressed on. "She has no one. She made a terrible mistake, I know she did. But she's paid for it. Isn't it enough?" I stopped what I was doing and faced her. "Paid for it? Mom, she and Mark paid me back the money they stole because they were facing jail time. That's not repentance, that's a plea bargain. She has never once, in all this time, apologized to me. Not a letter, not a text, not a voicemail. Nothing." "She's too ashamed," my mother cried. "Or she's not sorry," I countered. "She's sorry she got caught. She's sorry her life fell apart. But is she sorry for the pain she caused me? For the humiliation? For the fact that she tried to steal my entire future? I don't think so. She's your sister, my mother said, her voice pleading. Can't you find it in your heart to just talk to her? I took a deep breath. I had to make her understand. This was not about holding a grudge. This was about self-preservation. Mom, I love you, I said, my voice softening. But you have to understand my position. For years, Clara was my best friend. I trusted her with everything, and she used that trust to destroy me. She conspired with the man I loved to publicly humiliate me and steal from me. That's not a mistake. That's a fundamental flaw in her character. That's a level of cruelty I can't even comprehend. I continued. I have built a new life for myself from the ashes of the one she burned down. I am happy. I am at peace. Seeing her, talking to her, letting her back into my life in any way, it would be like inviting the arsonist back to the house I just rebuilt. I can't do it. My peace is more important to me than her comfort. I have to choose myself. I'm sorry, but my answer is no. And it will always be no. The finality in my voice seemed to get through to her. She looked sad, but she nodded. She finally understood that this was a boundary I would not cross. Not for her. Not for anyone. Life went on. The next chapter continued to flourish. I opened a second location in a nearby town. I was a business owner, a respected member of the community. The story of my disastrous wedding day had faded into local legend, a piece of my past that no longer defined me. One day, a woman came into the cafe. She was older, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She ordered a coffee and a scone and sat at a table near the counter. After a few minutes, she came up to me. "Excuse me," she said. "You're the owner, aren't you?" "I am," I said with a smile. "I just wanted to say I love what you've done with this place," she said. "It has such a wonderful feeling." "Thank you so much," I said. "My name is Eleanor," she said. I froze. It was Mark's mother. I hadn't seen her since that day in my uncle's office. She looked older. There were more lines around her eyes. "It's good to see you, Eleanor," I said, recovering quickly. "It's good to see you too," she said, her eyes welling up. "To see you so happy, so successful, after what my son did. You deserve all of this. And more." "Thank you," I said again, not knowing what else to say. "He's not a part of our lives anymore," she said quietly, as if she needed me to know. "After he left your sister, he moved away. We don't hear from him. He made his choices. He broke our hearts, too." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. And I was. She was a good woman who had been hurt by her son's terrible actions. "I just wanted you to know," she said, "that we often think of you, and we are so, so glad that you came out of that fire stronger than ever." She squeezed my hand and then she left. Her visit was unexpected, but it brought a strange sense of closure. It was a reminder that the shrapnel from Mark and Clara's explosion had hit many people. But it was also a testament to the fact that healing was possible. A few years later, I got married. His name was David, the bookstore owner. He was kind and funny and steady. He loved me for who I was, scars and all. We had a small wedding, just close friends and family, on a beautiful beach at sunset. My father walked me down the aisle. My mother cried, but this time they were truly happy tears. I did not have a maid of honor. Sarah stood by my side as my best woman. There was no big white dress, no massive church, just the sound of the waves, the warmth of the sun, and the love of a good man. It was perfect. It was real. I never saw Clara again. I heard bits and pieces from my mother over the years. She had moved to a different state. She had a string of dead-end jobs. She never found a lasting relationship. She was, by all accounts, a lonely and unhappy person. A ghost haunting the ruins of her own making. Sometimes, late at night, after a long day at the cafe, I would sit in my quiet house, my husband asleep beside me, and I would think about her. I would think about the sister I used to have, the girl I grew up with. the one who knew all my secrets, and I would feel a pang of sadness for that lost girl. Not for the woman she became, but for the sister I had lost. But the feeling never lasted long, because I would look at the life I had built, the business I had created from my own stolen dream, the home I had made with a man who cherished me, the peace I had fought so hard to win. They had tried to write my story for me. They had planned a tragic ending, with me as the victim, but I had refused to play my part. I had picked up the pen and written my own next chapter. And it was a much, much better story. It was a story of survival, of strength, and of a quiet, hard-won triumph. And it was all mine.